Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We will begin in just few minutes. Please take a time and get comfortable. Before we start, a few quick housekeeping notes. If you are experiencing any technical issues, simply refresh your browser or rejoin using unique link. Throughout the today's session, we would love to hear you from. Please use chat to introduce yourself by sharing your name, company, from where you're joining us from. Finally, we have a dedicated Q&A session at the end, and feel free to submit your questions anytime using a Q&A or chat window. We'll get started in next 2 minutes. We'll wait for everyone to join. Yeah, we have lots of attendees now already. Yes, here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join us today's webinar, Why Most Enterprises AI Programs Fails Before Scale, and How Leading Organizations Prove It. My name is Ashwini. I'll be your host for today. We are excited to have so many business and the technology leaders joining us from the different organizations. And AI has rapidly become a strategic priority for enterprises worldwide. Yet, despite significant investments, many organizations continues to face same challenge, not starting AI initiatives but successfully scaling them across the enterprise. And today's session, we will explore why that happens and more importantly, what successful organizations are doing differently to build AI programs deliver long-term business values. Yes, it is now my pleasure to introduce today's speakers, Mr. Kristen and Ben. And Kristen serves as a Chief Product Officer, and Ben is a Chief Commercial Officer at Sedda. With that, I'll hand over to Kristen and Ben to start the sessions. Gentlemen, stage is yours now.
Excellent. Well, good morning and good evening, everyone. My name is Christian Wild. As Ashwini mentioned, I'm the Chief Product Officer here. I just want to thank you for joining us today. I know your time is valuable, and I really appreciate you giving us the next hour of your time. As Ashwini mentioned, we will spend a chunk of today's time, about 45 minutes or so, going through the topic and then leave time for questions. I would also encourage you all to drop your questions in the chat, and we can potentially weave those into the discussion as we're going through it, or we can leave some time at the end. And as Chief Product Officer at Starter here, and as it relates to Adoptify AI, my focus is really on the product and platform side of bringing all this together. And so ultimately means how do we turn AI into something that a few teams are experimenting with into a capability that the whole enterprise essentially can run with, and it includes the readiness and the adoption and governance and everything that the operating model, kind of everything that powers it underneath. And so we'll be covering that today. And then with me, I'm delighted to spend some time with Ben Watson, who we've done a few of these before, and so it's always great to have this conversation. Ben, if you want to introduce yourself and then kick us off, that'd be great.
Perfect. Well, we had a very brief introduction. Normally, Chris, they say how old and smart we are, and we just went right into Mr. Christian and Mr. Ben. So I don't know if we lost our credentials or we're just so excited about today's topic. But Christian, as you mentioned, I am the Chief Commercial Officer for Starter. Starter is a portfolio company. We own several AI-related companies, including Adoptify AI, which is our AI transformation services company, AI Certs, our AI certification company, Netcom Learning. There's about, I don't know, 6 or 7 companies now that make up our portfolio of holdings. The reason why I bring that up is Christian and I, in both their roles over the last several years, have been in the trenches living the reality of companies adopting and adapting and accelerating their AI journey. And what we're going to do over the next 45 minutes is share what we've learned with that and best practices and the framework on how we think about how successful AI transformation projects really are starting to happen. Now, I stumbled over the word projects mainly because it doesn't feel like a project anymore, because a project means you're kind of one and done. I like our new phrasing, the AI journey, because I think it's going to be one of those never ending journeys. And what I mean by that is AI, as most of us probably in today's session already realize, is an ever-changing beast, right? You think you understand the current capabilities, you're struggling to roll it out across your organization, you're struggling to get people to then use it effectively, and then meanwhile, the darn technology is changing as well. And it doesn't matter which AI vendor that you're working with, whether it's Microsoft Copilot, or Claude or Gemini or even AI apps, the things are changing very quickly as well. So, how do we think about this? And what are the best practices to get everyone down that journey, get them out of, a demo or pilot, trap, and get it rolled out across the organization? So, with that in mind, let me go to the next slide. I keep forgetting I'm the one running the slide deck this time, Christian. Um, I'm gonna set things up. Christian's gonna go into more details, then I'll come back at the end to hopefully wrap things up. But I did want to share a couple of interesting slides, and the reason why I think this is important is it helps us, tee up things, which is, Chris, when you and I were doing this, I don't know, even a year ago, there's a lot of companies, experimenting with AI. They're thinking about AI. Fast forward to today, by gosh, I don't know of many companies that are not, using AI in some degree. Now, ironically, it could be their employees are using it and they're using it as shadow AI, like unauthorized AI usage. Most companies now are actually, knee deep into understanding how to roll this thing out. But again, very few people not using AI. These stats here reflected, I pulled from McKinsey. There's a variety of stats. They all echo the same thing. I do like to quote sources: 88% using AI in at least one business function, whether it's marketing, legal, finance, HR. Two or three are still experimenting versus enterprise wide. Um, that still holds true, right? They're still trying to get out of this. I'm going to try it with a couple of users and or teams, and once they get it going, I'm going to roll it out. They're still stuck in that pilot mode. That's going to be one of our topics today. And then, on the right-hand side, it's the opposite. One and three have been starting to scale it out, but now they're running into a different problem, which is they're rolled out AI across the enterprise, but it's not sticking. It's not changing the way people work. It's not becoming a new, here it says repeatable enterprise capability, right? So on the left side circle, right, people are stuck in pilot mode. On the right side, people have successfully got out of pilot mode. They've rolled it out across the organization. They've done the technology part, but it's not making a difference. So let's dive in a little bit deeper as to why we think this is happening. We have worked with so many friggin' companies in all stages of this. There's some pretty interesting things that we've learned, right? Now, the problem with getting stuck, right, is it actually is pretty expensive, right? Um, Companies are spending a lot of money on AI. In fact, even today, IBM stock is down because IBM's like, people are spending so much money on AI, they're decreasing spend on other software budgets so that they have the money to spend on AI. Um, but if you're not able to scale that out across the organization, you're getting some hidden costs, right? Which is lost productivity because employees are using things inconsistently, right? So it's almost the irony being you're rolling out a new technology that's designed to make people more productive, but if they don't fully embrace it, it stops and it starts, it tends to ebb and flow. That's actually a drag on productivity, right? The other one is, the return on investment. A lot of companies literally buy into AI with the promise of a higher return on investment. We're going to invest X amount, and we expect from a number of different places, including increased productivity, right? A return on that investment. Well, if you can't get out of pilot mode, you're spending your money, but you're limiting yourself to those involved in the pilot. Now, the third bucket is really interesting, and this is something that has popped up probably over the last 12 months. I don't know if I saw it 18 months ago. The risk, the risk of using AI, right? So 2 years ago, everyone's like, boy, this could have a huge impact. AI is indicating that it can do some things very effectively. It can augment people, right? It can automate workflows, right? So augmentation and automation, those were the two big things with the premise or promise of AI. But now that we're starting to roll it out, a lot of executives and leadership teams are like, hey, wait a minute, what's this thing called hallucination? What do you mean this thing can give different answers on different days? What do you mean it's not always right? Right? And all of a sudden, risk and governance as a way to manage or de-risk the use of AI starting to pop up, right? And if you don't take that into account as you try to scale across your organization, right? These are one of the things that is starting to pop up. Now, at the same point in time, the fourth bucket is interesting to me, duplicate efforts. I actually call this shadow AI, right? If you guys remember, shadow IT was a big buzzword several years ago. It was the unauthorized use of third-party apps not managed by the company's IT department. We're seeing the same thing now happening with AI. ChatGPT is probably a really good example. I, as an individual, can go here in the US, I'm a Canadian living in the US, I can go and buy ChatGPT for 20 bucks a month. And I can upload my company's spreadsheets, my company's documents, and really my IT team would never know that I'm doing it. And I'm using a third-party public tool with company private information. And I'm like, I can't wait for my company to do it. I'm going to try and do it. Or teams inside a company are like, I'm going to start doing it. I'm not really going to, tell others inside my company I'm doing it. I'm not going to share things and all the rest to get a lot of duplications, right? What do these four boxes mean, right? It's not just about being stuck in pilot mode or failed pilots, right? It's the inability to scale. And what I mean by that is the real value of AI is when everyone is using it effectively in their job role, in their team, and across the teams. If you're only doing one of those three levels, you're not going to get the return on investment and the synergy that I think everyone wants and needs, right? If you're just using it well inside your role, that's great. That's helping you. If your team's using it, your team is all working together and sharing best practices and all the rest, then the values, scope you're limited to the team. It's when teams that are using AI start to collaborate effectively, now you're starting to see workflows change. Now you're seeing the companies start to adapt to AI. They're not just adopting it as well. Now, again, down at the bottom, I mentioned McKinsey before, the Microsoft Work Trend Index. You can Google or Bing that as well. Lots of interesting supporting data on this stuff as well. And then NIST is a security framework. And NIST is now starting to create here their own AI risk management framework to try and put a framework in place around this notion of governance and all the rest. But that's helping to tee some things up as to some of the challenges companies are facing. And it's not just the pilot, right? There's a number of things that are dragging us down or holding us back on these things. Now, as I continue to babble on, I think I have 7 slides total, so it's all good. Um, Before I hand things over to Christian, Christian, I'm setting you up for success here. I'm the scissor, you're the steak. Okay, so you're the meat. I don't know where this analogy is coming from, but in the chat, okay, we have a pretty friggin' large group here. We're almost 3 digits of attendees. In the chat, type A, B, C, or D, or any combination as I continue on, and I'll try and refer back to it later. What is the barrier that's preventing you from scaling successfully in your organization around AI, right? What is most likely to prevent AI from scaling inside your organization? Getting out of pilots by having successful pilots. Is it leadership alignment? Your leadership is not aligned with the reality on the ground. Is it concerns around risk and lack of governance, or is it worried about the employees, the workforce, embracing it? Are they going to you're going to roll it out, give everyone a license to an AI tool, and you're worried that they're not going to actually start using it? Now, when we've done this before, we've usually had two or more letters or answers from people. It wasn't always just one thing, right? So it'd be interesting to see what the audience today in this session comes back with. I don't always have people doing all 4 letters, A, B, C, D, as well. So we'll see where the spectrum lies on this stuff. So while you guys are thinking about what is the barrier most likely to prevent AI from scaling inside your organization, let's go on to the next slide. All right. So AI pilots. Let's say you roll out your pilot and it's going well. Most of the time when you do a pilot, it's a technical pilot, right? You're really trying to validate that the infrastructure is in place, the technology is working. You rolled it out to 10 people, so therefore you can roll it out to 1,000 people, right? That's the way most companies think about pilots, right? You want to make sure it's technically working, right? Well, this is one of the problems with AI, right? AI isn't a technology solution by itself, right? And what I mean by that is people really, to get the value out of AI is going to have to change the way that it works. This is not like rolling out Microsoft Office, right? I mean, you roll out Microsoft Office, you test the deployment of it during a pilot. You know you can roll it out to 10, you roll it out to 1,000. Now everyone can create Microsoft PowerPoints, right? AI, if not used effectively, can be dangerous. There's risks with it. And it's not intuitive in the way that you use this new technology. It's a new set of capabilities, right? So a lot of the times, the way companies roll out AI is because they view it as simply one thing. Oh, it's technology. We roll out the technology, right? They don't understand that in addition to rolling out the technology, right? You have to get your people ready and you have to get your company ready. And this is something that Christian's going to take us a little bit deeper into, is this notion of there's a couple of things that need to happen in order to move AI forward. Rolling out the technology, now, no offense to IT teams, arguably easier than getting the people ready and getting the organizational ready, right? And people ready is training and workflows and skills and capabilities, the people usage side of things, right? On the company side of things, a lot of that is the policies, the guardrails, the governance, making sure everyone's on the same page as to what do we first want to get out of AI, and then what do we want to get out of AI later on, right? Now, as I've been talking, right, what we did, and we continue to update this, and we didn't do a lot of updates recently because I think we're kind of consistent now in the challenges that we see companies facing, right? If you don't have a long-term plan in place, even if you're successful in your pilot, you don't really have the map in place. You don't have the structure in place. Increasingly, it feels like the leadership teams and the people actually using the technologies, a little bit of a growing gulf between them, right? We're spending a lot of money on it. I want to see a return on investment. I want to see it quickly. And then down on the ground where the people are actually using it, okay, well, we got to put this in place. We got to do these things. We got to train these people, or the technology's changing. Two different audiences, right? Now, governance, when you roll out technology, you always have policies and procedures and rules and things like this. With AI, governance becomes really important, right? One of the key things, believe it or not, a lot of companies don't have is an acceptable use policy for AI, an AUP, acceptable use policy. What an AUP does is it says to the employees, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. Do not take sensitive information, internal documents, and use them with third-party tools like ChatGPT. Do not use AI without confirming and validating the output of the AI tool. You would think some of these things are common sense. They're not, right? I don't think we always understand when we upload something to a public version of ChatGPT, that is now in the public domain, right? That is now something that could be discovered. It could be something that's misused. Many people, when you use an AI tool in generative AI or chat tools in particular, they can be really misleading because they sound so authoritative. What should I do in a situation like this? Review this document, give me an analysis, and it comes back and it says, it's this, is this, is this, is very firm and clear. Not understanding it's not always right. Okay. And all these things start to slow down the scaling of it because it's easier to do it in small groups, a lot harder to do it with a whole bunch of different teams, with a whole bunch of different job roles, a whole bunch of different company functions like legal and HR. What works with one team doesn't always work with the same or with the other teams. Now, I thought this was interesting. We did this a couple months ago, kind of what does a pilot-led organization look like, and what does a enterprise-ready organization look like? And we created this slide because I think the first reaction for a lot of companies is let's do a pilot. Well, absolutely, you need to do a pilot, right? You got to test a bunch of different things. Pilot, small group, validating everything. What you validate is usually where the pilot-led organizations go astray, right? And what that means is they're working with one team, right? Uh, they are thinking about doing things after the pilot, right? Like, oh, don't worry about governance now, right? We're just focused on how to deploy the thing. We'll figure out governance later, right? Um, oh, you know what? We should go and test this out with Bob and the marketing team because Bob really loves AI. He talks about AI all the time, right? Doing things wrapped around individuals will help a pilot, but there's not many Bobs in a lot of teams. There may be Bob in marketing, there's a lot of Bob in legal and finance and HR, right? It's hard to make things repeatable when you're wrapping it around, a small group of early adopters or champions, right? Now, the way that a lot of pilots get measured is from a technical point of view, not so much from a business impact point of view. Now, of course, this makes sense, right? When you're dealing with a small group of people and you're rolling out the technology, right? You're deploying the technology during your pilot. The goal really is not to go and measure the impact of them using the tools. You're going to see the impact when you deploy it to a larger group when you start to roll it out. But if you're not thinking about that already, right, then a lot of the stuff is here's the pilot, and we're going to deal with a bunch of different things later, right? Well, a bunch of those things that we need to deal with later typically is around organizational issues, right? Not just the technical side of things, right? So successful ones start with the end in mind. Successful companies that are accelerating their usage, their effective usage of AI, start with the end in mind, work their way back, and say, okay, now let's do a pilot. But we know we need to have the governance put into place, the acceptable use policies, right? We know that we need to make sure that whatever we can do, there's not a specific name attached to it. We're going to roll this out to this team with this champion, but we're going to be able to roll this out to any team with their own champions, right? So really making this scalable from the get-go becomes pretty important, right? And again, people that are stuck in pilots are typically because they've only thought about doing pilots. And it's really interesting because you think they'd learn from this experience, but they're like, man, I just can't get out of I pilot this, I pilot this, I pilot this, and I'm not moving forward on these things. Now, one approach that we've done, and this is getting things set up for Christian to go deeper, is this notion of, okay, Ben, I get it. Okay, like we're all stuck in pilots. We're not all effectively using AI across the organization is why we're here, right? We have kind of divided things into what we call the 3x3, right? And the 3x3 grid is helping companies understand where are they in terms of getting their people ready, their organization ready, and getting that trust and governance ready. So three tracks of readiness, right? This is followed by the other three, right? 3x3. The second group of three is where are you on your AI maturity journey? And what we mean by that is, are you in the early stages of adopting a technology? You're evaluating it, maybe you're deploying it. Are you farther down that journey of using AI and now your company's starting to adapt to it and they're changing the way people work, teams work, workflows work? Or are you near the end of that maturity journey and you got a lot of this thing figured out? You got your people ready, your org ready, your trust and governance implemented, and now you need to scale it across your organization. So, three tracks of readiness: people, org, and trust, right? And align to the three stages of your AI maturity journey. Are you adopting the technology? Are you adapting to it? Or are you scaling it out across your organization? Depending on where you are in that 3x3 grid, you face different challenges and you need different solutions in order to move you to the next stage, right? So, with this, for example, um, getting your people ready, right? This is probably arguably one of the more easier tracks to complete, right? This is about getting people um, confident in using AI in their role day to day. I know what it is, I know how to use it, and because of that, I now am to the point of adopting it so that I use it every day, right? Now, if you don't have it, right, then you don't have a lot of people that have confidence in it. You have uneven adoption within teams. Ben and Christian get it, but Bob and Joe don't get it. So collectively, you got two individuals using it, two that don't. The team itself is disjointed, right? But getting people ready, right? Can your people confidently adopt and scale AI in their daily work? Now, this second track, the org track, right? Think of this like change management, right? Are your business processes ready to support AI at the enterprise scale? And a lot of people are like, what do you mean by that? Well, AI is a new way of doing things. It can augment your people and your teams. It can automate tasks and workflows. Your business processes have to change. And people are like, oh, well, that makes sense. Yes, but have you changed your business processes, right? Have you thought about what workflows are impacted and what workflows are not impacted, right? If you don't do this, right, then one, scale becomes more difficult, right? Because you got your people ready, but you're not changing your business processes. And business processes flow across teams, right? By definition, this team does this part, this team does this part, this team does this part. It's a business process. It's a series of workflows, and those workflows are made up of tasks. If you haven't thought about how AI helps or doesn't, augments, automates those steps, those tasks, those workflows, those processes, you're not going to start to see the value of AI because the value of AI is, again, when companies change the way that they work. And then this last one is, okay, I got my people ready, I've done my change management, I've got my workflows, my business processes, I've thought about it, or I'm changing them, right, depending on which stage of the journey that you're at. Meanwhile, lurking in the background is this ever growing area of concern around trust and governance, right? And a lot of this is risk, right? And as companies start to use AI, as their employees start to use AI, we need to make sure, or the company needs to make sure that they've thought about the guardrails they want to put into place, right? How do I make sure that people understand how AI is being used, especially internally, because AI now may be helping performance reviews. It may be, if they're not using AI, they're not performing their job effectively. How is the company sharing in a transparent way how AI is being used? Um, and if you don't put these things in place, it's not like people will stop using AI. They're just going to keep using AI in not the right way, right? And this is where I love the phrase because I keep saying it, shadow AI and risk. If you don't govern, if you don't manage AI, you have a lot of risk. And this is different than, again, I pick on Microsoft Office. Christian and I, we used to work for Microsoft, so I think we can say this. It's not like Microsoft Office. If you roll out this, what's the worst thing is people create bad PowerPoints. You roll out AI and they start to overly rely on it. They don't double check it. They're using, non-approved IT tools. There's a risk. So when companies are successful in rolling out AI, it is because they have the people, the processes, and the governance all moving forward at the same rate. If you don't, it slows things down. All right, Christian, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to hand some things over to you so you can go deeper into the journey, the stage of the journey, and also what we call this adoptified AI model, adapt ops. So I'm just teasing people as to the things they're going to
Excellent.
do. All right.
Well, thanks, Ben. I think you did a great job laying out the fact that enterprise AI scales really when all those three things come together: people, the organization, operations, and the governance, right? And I think the one thing I'll say before we go directly into this slide is that it's also important to note that those different components are not static or one and done, right? In each one of those things, it's an ongoing process, like people readiness, org readiness, trust and governance. You don't just do it once, right? We've seen this firsthand. A year ago, 18 months ago, people readiness was just sort of introducing AI and getting people to know what it was and prompting. And now it's around how do you introduce agents into their workflow? How do you have multi-agent orchestration happening? How does the person's work feed into the overall intelligence layer of the organization, right? So all these things continue to build and evolve. And I think for me, been part of all the big technology shifts in the last X number of years. I won't throw the decades out there, but AI for sure, I think has accelerated even further and faster than anything I've seen firsthand. So the framework that Ben mentioned here is this enterprise readiness framework. We use this to move all the three tracks together. It's fairly simple, right? So on the left-hand side there, down the side, you have the three readiness tracks that Ben talked about: the people readiness, the org readiness, and the trust and governance. And then across the top, you have the three phases that he mentioned as well: adopting, adapting, accelerating. The main point of this grid is that it's sort of a line of sight. It tells the leader not just where they are, but what the next move is on the next track and how all these things have to come together. If you sort of read it at one track at a time, in people readiness, you move from the early building confidence to developing champions and true integration of the work and across the organization. On the org readiness side of things, you move from assessing your workflows and thinking about it to really integrating them into the organization broadly, and then optimizing how execution happens. And on the trust and governance side, you move from the early establishment of guardrails and just, hey, how do we make sure this thing doesn't run wild, to strategic oversight and scaling responsibly, and yet also keeping up with the pace of the business, because we hear that from a lot of companies, this tension that exists where the business got ahead of risk, and then risk came back and said, we got to pull it back. So in terms of how we use this, you really don't get to skip a track, and you don't get to skip a stage. Now, when we engage with organizations, they may be in different parts of this based on the row and the header here. So it doesn't mean you have to always be in the same phase across each one of the phases. But the point is that for the most part, organizations have to go through this journey. They have to go through the different components and the stages, and then the three tracks as well. If you don't, that's where you get the spottiness and the unevenness, and that's where effectively AI falls down within the organizations, right? Because you just don't. You have people adapting at one pace, and but ultimately, some other part of the process becomes the weakest link in the chain, and that ends up being the drag on the system, or vice versa. So everything we show you the rest of the session really maps to this readiness framework and one of these cells. So if we talk about if we keep moving forward here, when we think about the enterprise maturity framework, Ben, if you want to go to the next slide here, the journey here, there's the three stages we talked about, and I'll just spend a little bit of time. And Ben hit on these, so I won't go too deep, but each one sort of has its own signature constraint or barrier, right? And then the first stage in adopting, this is where the pilots are showing the early value, the teams are building confidence, but it's early stage, and leadership is starting to find the priorities. It feels like progress, and it is, but the barrier in this stage is really that the success is isolated, as Ben mentioned. It's real, but it's just sort of stuck in one place, or it's not evolving at the pace or expectation level that you'd expect. On the second stage around adapting, so this is where AI is expanding across the functions, and governance is becoming operational, right? Instead of just sort of theory or people thinking about it. And teams are starting to follow the common practices. But it's interesting. We see a lot of early declaration of success in this phase, right? So this is where this stage kind of fools organizations, because there's genuine momentum, but still the barrier that we see here is that success isn't truly repeatable. You can point to wins, you can point to value, you can point to some parts of impact, but you're not really getting the full economies of scale at the organizational level. to really get so the next team can get the same results, right? It's usually isolated. And then, ultimately we want organizations to move to the acceleration phase. And this is really where AI is embedded across the enterprise, right? So governance is an enabler, not an inhibitor, right? So instead of it slowing it down, it actually enables the innovation because it's wisely implemented and actually done so in a way that helps people scale. The continuous improvement is factored in here. That's what I mentioned before about the cycle that keeps happening here intuitively and naturally, organically. So that continuous improvement makes its way into the next wave of scale, right? As things change, whether it be as people get more advanced, the org gets more advanced, or the policies change, all that gets baked into the next wave of improvement, and you can build upon it rather than getting stalled. And so, but even here, there can be a barrier, and that's making sure that the scale gets optimized like I said, rather than plateauing, right? So it's no longer whether AI works, it's no longer whether your company has embraced it and even worked well. It's really how fast can you respond as things change, right? And I'm sure you all are seeing this every single day. It's virtually impossible to keep up with what's happening in the pace of change with AI. And so ultimately, the organizations that are going to thrive are ultimately organizations that are able to become that AI native organization that not only can use it in their day-to-day, but then learn from it and adapt to the change as the market changes here, right? So ultimately, I think we really just continue to highlight that it's moving past, and enterprise transformation happens when you get past pilots and get into that repeatable enterprise capability. So let's talk about why AI governance has become a board level issue and priority. I'll say, Ben, I didn't want to interrupt you before, but you were talking about the governance. I would say in the last 30 to 90 days, the focus and shift that I've seen, again, anecdotally, but it seems to be so much on the security and risk side of things, and really raising itself at the board level for all those reasons you talked about, and you're seeing that reflected in ultimately the stock prices of a lot of companies and what's being talked about in market here. So governance used to be treated as kind of the slow track, as a thing that gets in the way. And ultimately, what we're trying to say is that framing is out of date, right? And ultimately, the reason why it's out of date is there's four things that have moved governance from a best practice to really a board level accountability, right? So there's regulatory expectations. The EU AI Act is just one example of that. Becomes more broadly applicable in 2026. They've extended the dates a little bit. So, but the more important thing there is that it's real and it's going to apply broadly. And I think most organizations, even outside of the EU, will end up adapting it for a variety of reasons, similar to the GDPR. And once it applies, AI governance is no longer nice to have. It's a legal accountability. So if you operate anywhere near the European market, this is now a compliance question that the board is responsible for, not just the technical teams down in the weeds. There's a bunch of international standards that are being put in place. ISO 42001. It's the first management system standard that's built specifically for AI governance. So for the first time, there's a certifiable, structured way to run AI governance program. And it's the same way ISO standards work for other things like quality or security. And the board understands that language. As Ben mentioned on the risk management side of things, NIST has a framework there. It gives organizations practical way to manage their risk across the whole life cycle. And then the emergence of agentic AI is really is one of many things that changes the urgency, right? So as AI agents become more autonomous, and start taking actions on behalf, not just producing drafts and editing. The moment that happens, where the software, the agents are acting on your behalf, the governance and readiness stop becoming operational choices, and absolutely our core strategic priorities, right? Otherwise, without the oversight on the autonomy, there can be a lot of things that can go sideways very quickly, right? So the governance is a huge part I want to emphasize, and why it's so important these days, and why I know my Twitter X feed is filled with all about governance and security right now as it relates to AI. Let's keep moving in the interest of time here, Ben. When we think about adapt ops, I want to hit this, and then we can skip ahead a little bit. This is the way that we bring our work to bear within enterprises. We have a structured approach called adapt ops, and ultimately the framework tells you where you are through the early phases. It helps you know where to move, and then it builds that continuous operating model with the 4 phases. And then all the readiness tracks that we talked about, the people, the organization, the trust and governance, they all run through every phase, right? So, it's fairly standard. You start with assessing the enterprise readiness, and through the discovery process and identifying those priority use cases and getting leadership alignment. And believe it or not, this is the phase that a lot of organizations end up skipping, but critically important because it sort of helps you set that foundation. We certainly are all for piloting. I know we talked about it before. As long as you're piloting with intention, that's where you can build on it and validate those high value use cases, and then prove that you can run it again, right? The goal in the pilots isn't to prove that the use cases work. I think everybody's sold on the fact that AI exists, has a big impact on the way someone works. It's now, can you scale it, right? And so that's where the third phase here, you expand to the successful pilots, and you get those into your processes, and then you're embedding it in that last phase, so you can optimize how all those pieces, the adoption, the governance, and performance, are effectively built into the DNA of your organization. And then you've got the continuous loop. As I mentioned, this isn't a one-time effort. Okay. So a couple things to call out, where we've seen this. This is an illustrative 4-week activation model for roughly around 250 information workers, and we across operations, HR, and corporate functions, and we measured the baseline usage in week 1 against adoption and productivity, and then again in week 4, and you could see that the adoption numbers really went through the roof, and we saw broad adoption, which, as Ben mentioned before early on, that right now basic adoption isn't necessarily the issue, but many cases, the adoption doesn't get anywhere near this. We looked at the number of hours reclaimed as another way to measure the operational effectiveness and efficiency, and we work with organizations to define what KPIs are most important to them, and we build that into the baselines and it's essentially the dashboard, and then we look at things like the actions executed. And so the key here is not the data elements itself and the data points. It's really the fact that how did we bring all of this stuff together so that you saw the adoption, you saw it built into the processes, and then ultimately you saw it accrue to true benefits. And how do we do that? I mentioned we have a way of doing that. We sit down with our customers and companies, and essentially we work with the organizations based on the assessment and discovery, what workflows are most important, what priorities are most important, and we establish a set of KPIs that are most relevant to the organization at hand. And then we have a enterprise dashboard that allows us to track those core metrics and performance indicators for the organization. And that's our enterprise readiness dashboard. And it provides all the relevant information that you need to understand what's happening within your business and to see that return on the impact of the AI and the work and how you've integrated into your organization. It allows you to look at department and different work that's happening. It can be customized to different tools that are being used. And ultimately, like I said, it's bespoke based on the needs of the organization. And that's just one of many ways we measure it and part of the Adoptify AI offerings. So, Ben, I think we've talked about, slides 14 and 15 are largely an overview. Maybe if we skip to 15, you can generally get a sense of how we engage. This, of course, is not one size fits all, but we look at it kind of along those dimensions of the phases: adopting, adapting, and accelerating. And we built out engagements, a standard playbook and engagements based on where organizations are. The discovery and assessment that we do with each organization, of course, dictates exactly what happens and in what time frame. But you can get a sense that, within a few weeks, early stage, to do the discovery and adopting phase, you can really assess the readiness and build that alignment in leadership. And then, a couple months, you can start adapting, identifying which workflows, getting the AI and agents in place in your workflows, getting your governance standards set up and running, and then building out the model that you then continue to build on in the accelerating phase, which typically is 12 plus weeks in duration as organizations get to that level of maturity. So, Ben, I know we're going over here a little bit, or we're getting towards the end. So, why don't you bring us home?
All right. Well, good job. Sorry, I was flipping around the slides a little bit. Hopefully, no one got too seasick and all the rest. But thank goodness it's being recorded, so this will live on forever. But just to echo what we've covered so far is one, the challenge of AI adoption and return on investment is more complex than people think. This is not like a traditional technology wave of change, right? On-premise to the cloud and things like that. The effective use of AI is a little bit more deep-rooted. And we took you through this notion of there's three readiness tracks: getting your people ready, your org ready, getting your governance ready. This changes, like you see on this slide, depending on what stage of the journey that you're at. One of the things that we're worked very hard on is creating these packages for companies depending on what stage of the journey that they're at and what progress they've made on those three different tracks, right? Unless you have all three tracks done relative to the stage that you're at, you will not successfully move to the next stage and the next stage. And I think this is probably one of the things I want people to walk away from this session today is think about those three different readiness tracks. Think about where your organization is at on those things, and then also go and think about where you are on the journey, right? You can have different tracks at different levels of advancement. And if you're really, wanting to get to that next stage of your journey, all three of these things need to be in alignment. Now, this is just a slide before we wrap up around, you know, four basic questions you should be asking yourself, right? Is the leadership aligned on this notion that we're on a journey and that we have three different readiness tracks to go through? That the definition of return on investment will vary if you're in the early stages versus the late stage, right? Do you have a model in place that allows you, as the technologies continue to change, to keep yourself up to date, right? Can you replicate this in a continuous way of things? We call it adapt ops. Think of this like RevOps and DevOps, standard repeatable processes that you can use to help write code, DevOps, to manage the revenue flow across the organization, RevOps, AdaptOps. How do you manage in a continuous way how AI flows across your organization? Governance, like Chris said, by gosh, probably the number one topic now with their customers. They have lots of other questions and challenges and stuff, but increasingly the board and the leadership team is what do we do to minimize the risk? And then, of course, there's growing concern from the employees around, is AI going to replace me? How do I help use AI to help me do my job better? How do I evolve my job using AI as AI continues to automate and augment the more basic tasks? Now, the goal behind all this stuff is if we're raising more questions than you have answers to, I love the box in the middle here as we wrap things up. We actually have made available for free a 27 question assessment. And you can see the link there. There's a QR code as well. Go take this assessment. It actually is really well done. It's been done with our practice leads around all the things we've learned, the basic questions, not even basic, the questions that need to be answered to help diagnose where you're at, and you're going to get a personalized report back with recommendations on what to do based on the answers that you gave. It's really good because it's thought provoking. And I think a lot of people on this session and from our past sessions and our current and past customers have the best of intentions, right? Like I am leading the effort to roll out AI across my organization, and we're struggling. It's more difficult than we thought. This assessment really helps you understand where your strengths are, where your areas of improvements are. And then, of course, Adaptify AI. We offer services and packages to help companies depending on where they're at. All right. I appreciate everyone taking an hour out of their time. I actually had to go and look at what day it was. This is how sad it is. It's a Tuesday. Wasn't sure it was Tuesday or Wednesday. It's a Tuesday. I hope everyone has a great Tuesday. Closing thoughts from you, Christian, as we wrap things up.
Yeah.
Well, just a big thank you for everyone that joined. There was a large group here that was part of the call, so thank you. Again, really just emphasizing the fact that think about this broadly as it relates to your own organization. How do you bring all those pieces together, and then ultimately use the assessment as a way to help you start thinking about that. So great discussion. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you, Ben, for valuable insights. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. Well, we hope today's discussion has provided practical insights into what truly takes you to move behind the AI experimentation and build enterprises-wide AI capability. We also encourage you to stay connected with us. After this session, our team will get in touch with you for the future discussion and the clarity. On behalf of Kristen and Ben and everyone at Adaptify AI and Sardar, thank you once again for joining us and have a wonderful day. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.